Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is our last webinar of 2023, at least from Netskope it is. And this episode is about how Netskope can improve your current situation with all your solutions you have in place and their integrations. Hence the term better together. Our goal today is to inform you how to position Netskope against the bigger platform players and show how integrations can build a better security posture. But before we do that, we must check out the exclusive team who is occupying Netskope. So first of all, quick introduction. Myself, Sven Hof, I'm a business development manager for New Technologies. I've been at Netskope, at Exclusive for 6 years. I came from the pre-sales team and then I went to the commercial dark side 3 years ago. My colleague Cedric is our technical pre-sales and he's doing the presentation with me today. Good afternoon, Cedric.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Not present, but more than capable is our senior pre-sales David Mitz. And everything related to coding is for our internal sales expert, Avi, and Joyce is our marketing expert. Quick recap about Netskope, for those who don't know Netskope yet, or can use a quick refresh. The Netskope platform is cloud native from start and is designed to enable organizations to make a transition to the cloud safely using cloud native security controls. That means that using inline controls as well as API controls, organizations can secure sanctioned and unsanctioned cloud services, web traffic, but also private apps. All from a single console with a very general policy enforcement and utilizing a common set of microservices. A long text, but what does it mean? No matter where you are, you have the same fast and reliable secure experience. And because they have their own new edge network and don't depend on any public cloud providers, they're very fast. Zero trust is from the core of Netskope, so it's not a feature added on along the way because it was hot and trendy, but it's literally in the core of the Netskope engine. When customers ask me, why shouldn't I go for one vendor approach? There are many reasons which we will tackle today, but I always tell one story which gives them the aha moment. So if you look at this picture, I'm a big Apple addict. I've got everything in that picture except the speaker maybe, but otherwise I've got them all. It all works great together, perfect integration, perfect ecosystem, as long as you're willing to buy everything from them. One of those components isn't good enough anymore and I want to replace it with something else, I'm going to lose a lot of features, or even worse, just a very dumb but expensive device. Like an Apple Watch without an iPhone is a very dumb watch. And you're actually having the same risk when you go with the one vendor approach for your cybersecurity. It may work great together, or at least according to marketing, but can you actually do the rip and replace? If at certain points one solution isn't good enough anymore, and you want to do a rip and replace with another solution, can you do it without compromising your security? Because why should you go for a platform? Because a platform is very popular. There's a reason why people want to do that. And this is what a platform promises, right? It will be an easy setup. It'll be a lot cheaper because you have everything from one single vendor, so you have those stacking of those discounts, policy consolidation, so better visibility, easier to manage, single pane of glass, and overall better security because everything is integrated. Sounds great, right? Now, in reality, we see that isn't always easier, and most vendors bought other solutions and are still struggling to integrate them. So it really depends on the solution and the vendor. But even if they're integrated, you still need to configure it. It's not because you know how to configure a firewall. You can also configure secure access to your cloud applications. Those are completely different products and requires different skill sets. And again, new training. And it may be cheaper at first, but you have to know they can increase the price year by year, and they're gonna know you won't change anything because you're stuck in that vendor locking. And policy consolidation is possible on a certain level, for example, multi-cloud security, but people are expecting too much from it, and they'll still be disappointed because there's still different solutions. And the vendor name may be the same, the product is different and has different needs, so also different way of policy building. And building dashboards to integrate more information from different solutions coming along, but still you will need to click through different consoles to get all the info you want. And to be fair, how can one vendor who does it all be better than experts in who define security in their specific space? But still, we see a lot of customers going for that single platform and they're still interested. Why? Actually, because those platforms are using the term CSMA, which stands for cybersecurity mesh architecture. And it has to do with the outcome that CSMA has to offer. CSMA is a composable and a scalable approach to extending security controls. Even to widely distributed assets, its flexibility is especially suitable for increasingly modular approaches consistent with hybrid multi-cloud architectures. CSMA really enables a more composable, flexible, and resilient security ecosystem. You can hear in the name, the ecosystem is very important in that one. And rather than having every security tool running in a silo, you're going to go for a mesh to enable those tools to interoperate through several supportive layers. So to make it a lot easier, I made a slide, actually 3 questions. So why are we doing this? Well, to protect the dynamic security environment. It's changing all the time. We have less people, less skills available, so we want to deploy it and maintain it easily. How are we going to do it? We're going to build an architecture that's agile for your hybrid and multi-cloud environment. We're going to do that with a collaborative approach between integrated security tools. Again, integration and ecosystem is key here. And what is it exactly? It's a combination of different layers of connected security services. And if we go deeper in those different layers, we can see that one of them is security analytics. Security analytics and intelligence combines data and lessons from other security tools and provides analysis of threats and triggers appropriate responses. Breaking out of that siloed approach and sharing threat intel makes every product stronger. A distributed identity fabric provides capabilities such as directory services, adaptive access, identity proofing, and more. And you have to know that identity travels with you from on-prem to cloud, from your endpoint to your mobile phone. And the only thing that remains the same is your identity and the context that it holds. Because giving context to a user and its behavior is crucial in protecting your identity and all your access to your assets and data in the cloud and on-prem. Consolidation of policy and posture management. For example, you can translate a central policy into native configurations for multiple individual security tools. A good example would be the protection of a multi-cloud environment. But again, where possible and it makes sense. User firewall rules are completely different to data center firewall rules. So you're going to have consolidation where it makes sense. And last but not least is the consolidated dashboards. They will offer you a complete view of the security ecosystem. In that way, it can enable security teams to respond more quickly and more effectively to security events. And if you look at all those outcomes and all the different features that we just talked about, we can do a lot of them already with Netskope and their Netskope Cloud Exchange. And now, Cedric, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you very much, Stan, for this great introduction, and thanks for sharing some information about the cybersecurity mesh architecture. Today, we will not talk that much about the Netskope Intelligent SSE nor the Netskope Borderless one, so the Netskope SSE/SASE solution. No, we will more focus on the Netskope Cloud Exchange. The main goal of Netskope Cloud Exchange is to give you the ability to exchange information between Netskope, your security solution, and your other existing security, business, or management solutions. So let's take a look at that together. Well, first of all, it's an additional component. So it is not by default integrated, or it does not come with Netskope Cloud. However, you can set it up on your own way on premise, so on a simple server, or you could actually ask for a service where Netskope will host that in the cloud, so it will be much easier for you to set up. What is Netskope Cloud Exchange? Well, Netskope Cloud Exchange provides a couple of models, 4 to be exact, and give you the ability to not only share user information, application information, but also information regarding to threats. You will also be able to integrate with ticket orchestration tools and any other tool that you can use to notify users or administrators of something going wrong. So the Netskope Cloud Exchange is something that you can install on your own. It is no additional cost, no additional fee for that. However, if you go for the cloud service of the Cloud Exchange, there will be a cost. But today I have set it on here on our on-premise data center, where actually a small Linux server is good enough to deploy that virtual machine. We have 4 models. Those 4 models will give us the ability to integrate with over 60 other security business and management tools, and that will be done through what we call plugins. So on this slide, we can see the 4 different models. The first one is a very important one where we can exchange the logs from the Netskope Cloud to our SIEM solutions, a syslog server, or even an NDR or XDR service. Next, as mentioned, we can integrate with ticket orchestration tools where you can then send information to create tickets in a queue, or you could also send information to a notification platform such as Teams or Slack to make sure your administrators and users are aware. Then we have the Cloud Threat Exchange, where it actually focuses on sharing information regarding to threats. So an example of that would be IOCs, file hashes, both for threat or data that has been recognized as sensitive, but also malicious URLs. And this is important. We can both share that information from our existing security solutions toward Netskope, but also from Netskope towards those existing security solutions. And then last, but certainly not the least, we have the Cloud Risk Exchange model, which today contains 2 models. The one focusing on user risk exchange, and the other one focusing on the application risk exchange. So let's get started by taking a look at how we actually integrate with Netskope Cloud Exchange. Well, most of the time you will use API integration. So a simple URL towards the management console and an API key is good enough to get started. If you are integrated with directory services, your IDP or an EAM solution, you might use LDAP or SCIM integrations as well. And when it comes to integrating with Netskope Security Cloud itself, you will use both API version 2 and SCIM. Notice that API version 2 will give you some granular control about what permissions you will have in the Netskope Cloud Exchange. That being said, talking about permissions, read-only permissions are good enough. However, if you want to go much further, like let's say take action in one of your security tools, well then of course you will need to have the required permissions, such as read permissions and write permissions. I will come to that later on, don't worry. A brief word about the virtual machine that I have hosted today and that is hosting the Netskope Cloud Exchange application. It's a Linux-based operating system that is running on Docker containers, or at least the Cloud Exchange is running on 4 Docker containers. And we can actually get started very easily using this Python 3 script that will set up the entire environment for us. So we will have 4 Docker containers where we have the Netskope Cloud Exchange core and the UI that we'll be mostly using. So once you have done the installation, you need to, of course, connect to the Netskope Cloud Exchange UI. And the first step that you will do is integrate the Cloud Exchange with your Netskope Security Cloud, the EZZ/SASE solution. To do so, as mentioned, we will go to, or we configure API version 2 and SCIM integration. As shown on this slide, simply go to Netskope tenants and add your tenant. What is important here, however, as mentioned, is to make sure that the API keys you are using have the permissions you need to. So if you want to take action, for instance, you want to isolate a user, you will need much more than just read permissions in that solution. The same goes when you integrate with your own Netskope SSE solution. You want to make sure that you have correct permissions. So therefore, use API version 2, and as we can see on this slide, you will be able to granularly define in what scope, what permissions you have. So either read or read and write permissions. Also notice you can add different configuration Netskope tenants for the same tenant. So I could add, like, let's say 3 configurations for the same tenant, but using 3 different API keys. And of course, that way, if one of my API keys get compromised, my entire environment is not. So let me actually switch the screen and go to the Netscope Cloud Exchange, where we actually get started to set up the modules and show you how it looks like. The first step, and this is also when you log in for the first time, is of course you go to the home page where you can see the different services that are up and running. The next step, as mentioned, is to configure the Netscope tenant, what I have done here on the Netscope tenants. And then you will need to enable the models. So depending on what you want to use, so let's say, go to General tab. Let's say you are using the log shipper, well then of course you need to enable it. And at the moment you enable another model, it will become available instantly. So if I do now enable the threat exchange model, you'll see on the left-hand side that I should be able to see. I hope my internet connection is not gone. Oh yeah, it is. So I'll just briefly reconnect. Sorry for that. But just what I wanted to share here with you guys is that you don't have any, you don't need to wait. You actually will have the model enabled instantly whenever you click on enable the model. So let's try it again. Okay, I might need to reconnect. Sorry for that. Okay, so we can see the 4 models that I mentioned. If I go to the settings again, the general tab, we can see the 4 models. Notice that we have a 5th model for the application risk exchange. So those 2 are part of the cloud risk exchange model. And if I do enable the threat exchange, you can see threat exchange is now available. And if I go one back, I'm now able to configure the threat exchange plugins and of course the business rules and sharing rules that I will show you later. Okay, so what I want to show you here is in the settings, we need first to configure the Netscope tenants, and then the next step is to enable the models that we want to, and then of course start configuring those models. So let's go back to the slides and actually show you the goal of today's session. It is to show you how easy it is to integrate with a ticket orchestrating tool such as Jira, to integrate and exchange information with an EDR, XDR solution such as SentinelOne, and to get user and identity information from Okta, which is an IDP and EIM solution. For today's webinar, most of those integrations are using API. So as mentioned, very easy. We just provide an URL as well as an API key. This slide covers what I mentioned previously, how you enable a module. And the next step is actually to configure the plugins. So each model you enable has different plugins. So let me show you that. If I go, for instance, to the first one, the log shipper model, you can see I have a plugin tab. If I click on it, we can see I already configured one plugin towards my Netskope security cloud engine, but I could, of course, add another plugin to now share information from my Netskope cloud towards, for instance, Elastic, Google Chronic, Microsoft, etc., etc. So you can see all the plugins here that are supported for this log shipper model. If we go to the ticket orchestration tool, same thing, we can go to the plugins. We can see that here in my case, I have 2 plugins, the one that is configured with my Netskope SSE and the other one that is configured with Jira. When it comes to actually configuring Jira, I just want to go back to the slides to give you some context here. The first step, as mentioned, is of course to add the plugin. But then you want to specify what data you want to share between Jira and Netskope Cloud. And in our case, what we want to do is create tickets automatically. So we will specify what data we want and then how that ticket should be created and how it should look like. So we can see that here we have very granular control on how we can create a ticket and the information we want to pass through that ticket. And then basically, if we go to our ticket orchestration tool, we will of course see the ticket created, as you can see on the slides. Okay, so let me go back to the Netskope Cloud Exchange platform. We see the plugin is active, so that's we are good to go. And then under the business rules, this is the place where you will define what data you want to get from a specific plugin. So we can see here that I am actually pulling information from the Netskope Cloud Exchange. And then on the tickets, you will see the different tickets that are being created. And to create such a ticket, we need to assign a business rule to a queue. So if I go to queues, you can see I created a very basic queuing that says, okay, take all the information you just gathered from that specific business rule and use that to create a ticket inside Jira. And the result is, as I showed you here, a ticket is being created, and you can, of course, also assign it to a specific group or administrator. Let's move on and show you how the user risk exchange model works. So here we will actually integrate with Okta. So we'll move on to the user risk exchange model. And it's exactly the same. We start with configuring the plugin. We can add multiple plugins if we want to for the same solution. We can have a look at if whether or not this plugin is doing, if we're performing some actions. But as we just saw, the first and most important step is to create a business rule. Here we define what information we want to pull. And then we specify an action. This means we are going to use the business rule we just created, and we're now going to specify the action that we want to take. If we integrate with an IDP such as Okta, we will be able to add a device to a specific group, or a user, to a specific group, or either remove that user from a specific group. The third action, as we can see here, and that's the action that I actually selected, is no action. Why would you choose no action? Well, basically because underneath you can specify that you just want to generate an alert. So this action here, so this action rule will do nothing. It will not remove the user, not create a new group. It will simply create, let's say, logs in the ticket orchestrator tool. And that's very useful because if you create a business rule and the queuing rules in your ticket orchestration tool, you will be able to integrate information from your different solutions and then create central tickets in your ticket orchestration tool. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me go back to the slides and actually cover the third example that I want to show you today. Actually, this slide is very nice because it shows you what information you can pull from Okta. Okta has a new functionality where they're actually able to investigate user behavior. As we can see here, we can identify new locations, new devices, IP addresses being used, and even the velocity. So what we're basically doing if we integrate with Okta is we are fetching that information and combining that information with information from the Netskope user behavior analytics model. As we can see here, if we go to Okta, for instance, my user has a score that is low level, but maybe depending on what Netskope is seeing, so let's say that I'm trying to download a lot of files, maybe Netskope is estimating that my user risk score is pretty high because I'm performing bulk downloads. And so again, by correlating and aggregating that information together, it will give you a nice and accurate user risk score. Okay, so let's move on to the third example, which in my opinion is really a nice use case where we can integrate with EDR and XDR solution. So for today's demo, I integrated with SentinelOne, which is an EDR XDR solution that we have in our vendor portfolio. As we can see here, the first step, as always, we create the plugin, nothing more than specifying the management URL and the API token. We then go to a business rule. So there we specify what data we want to pull. In my demo, I started pulling information from SentinelOne, more specifically IOCs from SentinelOne. And then under the sharing tab, I will specify how I want to share information. And as we can see here, I'm sharing information from SentinelOne towards Netskope. But you could also create another rule where you say, okay, I want to share information from Netskope to SentinelOne. That's perfectly possible. The main goal and the idea behind this configuration is actually to then put those IOCs in a dynamic list and use that dynamic list to protect our cloud assets, either in real time or using the API-enabled protection. So we have two use cases that we can apply here. The first one, real-time protection, as I will show you in a second, and the second one is API-enabled protection. So let me show you that. Here we are on the Netskope Cloud Exchange. So this is the additional module or application virtual machine we started. And on my right-hand side, I'm showing you the Netskope Security Cloud. So this is the SSE SASE solution. If I go under my policies, I'm able to create either real-time protection policies or API data protection, so using CASB functionalities. But if I go here under files, you will see that I now have a new file profile that is being added called Sentinel-1 IOCs BE. This is a list of files, hashes, in our case, SHA-256 hashes that are being sent from Sentinel-1 through the Netskope Cloud Exchange towards the Netskope SSE tenant, as you can see here. So this list here is dynamically populated and comes from Sentinel-1. We can now use that list to create our custom threat protection rule. So what I'm saying here is just take the dynamic list I just populate or get populated from Sentinel-1 and use that for a threat protection profile. And now we can use that threat protection profile inside the real-time protection rules or inside the API data protection rules. So let's take a look at that. I could create a new cloud app access policy where, let's say, for instance, I want to protect the Google Drive application. Could go for also other applications, of course. We specify the action. I will say I will block, and then I can add a threat protection profile. And this time I'm able to select the new custom Sentinel-1 IOC threat protection profile I just showed you. So you can see that easy it is. And then basically, if we save that policy, we will now use all the information stored in this dynamic list. So based on the IOCs from Sentinel-1 and block threats, malware in real time. We can do exactly the same, but this time using the API data protection. So we are leveraging the CASB API capabilities. If I go on the next gen, you will see I already created one, API threat protection using the IOCs from Sentinel-1, targeting OneDrive, so Microsoft OneDrive specifically, and using, as we can see here, the same threat protection profile I showed you previously. So let me go back to the slides and show you actually a result or a use case that I just effectuated a couple of hours ago. You can see that here at 2 o'clock. So I actually uploaded a file that was already seen by Sentinel-1 as malicious. You can see that here on the right side. And that file has been uploaded to OneDrive. And the workstation that I'm using here is not running Netskope. So Netskope is basically not aware that that file has been uploaded to OneDrive. But please remember that Netskope has some great capabilities where we are able to perform API-enabled protections, as I just showed you with CASB, and then we are able to perform also retroactive scans. And the result of that retroactive scan, we can see that here, where Netskope will actually use that same IOC list and scan the entire cloud storage you specified, in my case, Microsoft Office OneDrive, and take a look at all malwares that could reside there. Okay, so just this slide to show you that, of course, when Netskope is being inline or even out of band, it has its own cloud sandbox. It has its own heuristic analytics performance and a V engine. But of course, the main goal here in this use case was to show you how we can use information from our different security solutions and how we can exchange that information using the Netskope Cloud Engine. Okay, so here we are just going to show you the result of the API-enabled protection. So if we go to API-enabled protections, we can run a new retroactive scan. That's exactly what I have done here, scanning the entire OneDrive cloud storage and looking at eventual malware. And we can see here that the Excel file that was containing malware is correctly identified. Last thing I want to show you, and then I will give the word back to my colleague Stan, is if we go to the home page of our Netskope Cloud Exchange, we'll have some nice dashboards that could help us understand what information has been exchanged between the different solutions. So we can see that here for ticket orchestration tool, the threat exchange tool, as well as the user risk exchange if you have configured one. So I will give the word back to Stan. If you have any questions about one of the models, if you maybe can show you also the entire list of all the plugins that are available, so you can have a look at maybe one of those solutions you are using in your environment. But if you have any question, please feel free to ask them.
All right, thank you, Cedric. So I hope the message was clear today that even though with a best of breed approach, we can have the same outcome as the platform players are promising. So the whole idea is that we stop with doing stuff in silos and we do an integration together for a broad approach. You saw examples of threat intel sharing, which make every product even more stronger, but also making the whole process easier for your security team with information shared between different products in the same dashboard, or even to follow up tickets and stuff like that. So that's the idea, right? Doing more with less. That's the whole idea. That's also what we're doing with Netskope and other products we have in our portfolio. Going forward to the future, API integration between products is key. There's no single vendor that can promise and do everything. You'll still need to do a combination of maybe some consolidation, like with Netskope for your SSE part, and then combine it with other products. That's what we did, and that's what we would like to do together with other vendors, with our customers, partners, etc. So again, Cedric, thanks for looking into it and showing us, and thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. You can always do a reach out to us, and until next time.